My cousin smirked, uninviting me from her wedding. She didn't know I managed the venue she booked. I flagged her reservation as high risk after finding her history of fraud. The system canceled her dream wedding 2 weeks before the date, and the fallout was spectacular. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The migraine had started somewhere behind my left eye around 3 in the afternoon, and by the time I parked my car in front of my parents' house, it was a full-blown thumping rhythm against my skull. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, pressing my cool palms against my temples, trying to summon the energy to walk inside. I was exhausted. Not just the physical tiredness that comes from working 60-hour weeks, but a deep, marrow-level fatigue that settled in whenever I had to deal with my extended family. I had been fighting a low-grade flu for a week, my body worn down by the sheer stress of the last month. But tonight was mandatory. It was the big announcement dinner, as Aunt Carol had breathlessly labeled it in the group chat, followed by 6 heart emojis. We all knew what the announcement was. Tiffany, my cousin, had been engaged to Gary for 6 months, and tonight she was finally going to reveal the date and the venue. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and walked into the house. The heat hit me instantly, smelling of pot roast and Aunt Carol's overpowering floral perfume. There she is, the working girl. Aunt Carol's voice pierced through the headache like a needle. She came rushing out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "We were worried you wouldn't make it, Jane. We know how busy you always are." "I'm here, Aunt Carol," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Wouldn't miss it." "Well, come on, come on. Tiffany is dying to tell everyone." We gathered around the dining table. My parents were there, looking apprehensive, along with my uncle and a few other cousins. And there, sitting at the head of the table like royalty holding court, was Tiffany. Beside her sat Gary, looking pale and slightly terrified, clutching a glass of water like a lifeline. Tiffany looked radiant. I had to give her that. She had that glow of someone who was getting exactly what they wanted. She waited until everyone was seated, the silence stretching out until it was uncomfortable. "Okay, everyone," Tiffany said, clapping her hands together. "Gary and I have finally locked it in." "Tell us," Aunt Carol squealed. "We are getting married on June 15th, Tiffany announced, beaming. "And we managed to book the Sterling estate." A gasp went around the table. The Sterling estate was the venue in our state. It was an impeccably restored historic mansion with acres of botanical gardens, famous for its exclusivity and its 6-figure price tag. It was the kind of place celebrities booked. "Oh, Tiffany, that's incredible," my mother said, though I saw her glance worriedly at my father. We all knew Gary worked in IT support, and Tiffany was a freelance lifestyle consultant, which was code for unemployed. That must have cost a fortune. "Gary's parents are helping, and we're making it work," Tiffany said dismissively. "It's going to be the event of the year. Black tie only, plated dinner, live orchestra." I nodded along, genuinely impressed they had managed to secure a date. "That's amazing, Tiff. The Sterling is fully booked for nearly 2 years out. How did you manage June?" Tiffany's eyes snapped to mine. There was a glint there, something cold and sharp. "We have our ways, Jane. Not everyone has to wait in line." "Well, congratulations," I said, reaching for the water pitcher. "I'll make sure to request the time off." The room went dead silent. I paused, the pitcher hovering over my glass. I looked up. Aunt Carol was studying her fingernails. Gary was staring at the tablecloth. Tiffany was smiling, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was a smirk, a small, satisfied curling of her lip that made my stomach turn over. "Oh, Jane," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "That won't be necessary." "What do you mean?" I asked, though the cold feeling in my chest told me exactly what she meant. "Well," she sighed, acting as if this was a great burden for her. "The Sterling is very exclusive, you know. They have strict capacity limits. and with Gary's family being so large and all our friends, we had to make some really tough cuts. She leaned forward, locking eyes with me. "You aren't invited, Jane. I mean, we really just want people there who support our lifestyle and our happiness. And you've always been so judgmental. Plus, I didn't think you could afford the dress code, honestly." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother gasped, "Tiffin." "Why, that is your cousin." "It's my day, Aunt Marie," Tiffany snapped, her smile vanishing. "My day, my rules. Jane isn't coming. Neither are you actually, if you're going to make a scene about it." I sat there, the blood rushing in my ears, the humiliation burning my cheeks. I looked at Gary, hoping for some kind of defense, but he just looked away, completely beaten. "It's fine," I said quietly, my voice shaking just a little. I set the pitcher down. "If that's what you want, Tiffany, it's fine." "Good," she said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "I'm glad you understand your place." I stood up. "I'm not feeling well. I'm going to go." "Don't let the door hit you," Aunt Carol muttered into her wine glass. I walked out of that house with my head held high, fighting the urge to vomit until I reached my car. I sat in the dark, gripping the steering wheel, the betrayal cutting deeper than the headache. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the cruelty, the smirk, the joy she took in hurting me publicly. But as I started the engine, the tears stopped. A cold, hard realization settled over me. Tiffany had focused so much on her exclusive venue that she hadn't bothered to ask what I had been doing for the last 6 months. She didn't know about my promotion. She didn't know that 3 weeks ago, I had been named the new general manager of the Sterling estate. The drive home was a blur. I didn't turn on the radio. I just replayed the scene in my head over and over. "You understand your place." That phrase echoed in the quiet cabin of my car, bouncing around with the rhythm of the tires on the pavement. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I dropped my purse on the floor, kicked off my heels, and sank onto the sofa. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mom. "Jane, I am so sorry. We are leaving now. I'm going to talk to Carol. This is unacceptable." I stared at the screen, the blue light stinging my tired eyes. I typed back, "Don't bother, Mom. Let her have her day. I'm fine. Really." But I wasn't fine. I was furious. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, my hand trembling slightly. It wasn't the wedding itself. I didn't care about a black tie party. It was the years of this. Years of Tiffany being the golden child, while I was the boring one who studied, worked late, and paid my own bills. Years of Aunt Carol making excuses for Tiffany's bad grades, her crashed cars, her maxed-out credit cards, while criticizing my career choices as too safe. I remembered the time Tiffany stole my ID to get into a club when we were 20, lost it, and I had to spend 3 weeks replacing everything while she laughed about it at Thanksgiving. I remembered the time she borrowed $200 from my purse for emergency gas money and came back with a new pair of designer sunglasses. And now this, the ultimate power move, hosting the wedding of the century at the place where I worked and banning me from the premises. I took a sip of wine and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The headache was fading, replaced by a sharp, focused clarity. The next morning, the emotional hangover was worse than the physical one. I showered, dressed in my crispest navy suit, and pulled my hair back into a severe bun. I applied my makeup with precision, hiding the dark circles under my eyes. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the hurt cousin who had fled the dinner table. I saw the general manager of the state's most prestigious event venue. I drove to the Sterling estate, the gravel crunching under my tires as I pulled up the long, oak-lined driveway. The mansion stood imposing and grand, a masterpiece of Georgian architecture. I loved this place. I had started here as an assistant coordinator 5 years ago and worked my way up, learning every inch of the property, every vendor, every clause in our contracts. "Good morning, Ms. Dawson." The security guard nodded as I swiped my badge. "Morning, Frank," I replied. I walked through the marble foyer, the sound of my heels clicking on the stone echoing through the empty hall. My office was on the second floor, overlooking the West Gardens, the exact spot where Tiffany planned to say her vows. I sat at my desk and booted up my computer. My assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door frame. "Morning, Jane. Here's the updated schedule. Also, the florist for the Henderson wedding needs to speak with you about the hydrangeas." "Thanks, Sarah. I'll call them in a bit." I took the papers, keeping my voice steady. "Actually, before you go, can you pull up the file for June 15th, the booking under Tiffany Miller?" Sarah frowned, tapping her chin with a pen. Miller? Oh, right, the one who keeps calling the front desk to ask if we can dye the fountain water pink. That one." "That's the one," I said dryly. "Sure thing. It's pending approval on the insurance rider, I think. I'll send TH. E-digital file over." "Thanks." As Sarah left, I stared at the blank screen, waiting for the file to load. Tiffany thought she was untouchable. She thought her world of manifesting, outcomes, and bullying family members extended to the real world of high-stakes business contracts. She thought that because she had secured a booking, she owned the place. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. A contract isn't just a promise, it's a liability. And I knew exactly how to read the fine print. I opened the file, Miller-Stevens wedding, June 15th, gold package. Estimated guest count, 200. I scrolled through the notes. It was worse than I thought. The notes from our sales associate, Emily, were riddled with red flags. Client requested waiver of damage deposit, denied. Client asked if we accept cryptocurrency, denied. Client successfully paid initial booking fee via credit card ending in 4490. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a second. The memories of Tiffany's financial habits flooded back. It wasn't just the sunglasses or the borrowed cash. 2 years ago, Tiffany had started a boutique online store selling rebranded cheap jewelry. When the business failed because she never shipped the products, she didn't refund the customers. She ghosted them. My dad had to loan Aunt Carol $3,000 to help pay off Tiffany's legal fees when one of the customers threatened to sue. I had been the one to drive Tiffany to the lawyer's office that day. "It's not my fault people are impatient," she had complained in the car, checking her makeup in the visor mirror while I navigated traffic. "They're just jealous of my brand." "Tiffany, you took their money," I had said gently. "It was an investment. Business is risky, Jane. You wouldn't understand. You just punch a clock." I had paid for her lunch that day because her cards were frozen. I had listened to her cry about how unfair the world was. I had, in my own stupid way, protected her. And here she was, trying to pull the same stunt on my employer. I looked back at the screen. The initial deposit was $5,000, significant, but not the full amount. The next payment of $15,000 was due in 3 days. Then I saw the name on the credit card used for the deposit, Gary Stevens. Poor Gary. He was a nice guy, quiet, unassuming. He worked hard in it, probably made a decent salary, but nowhere near enough to support Tiffany's delusions of grandeur without going into massive debt. I remembered seeing him at the dinner last night, looking like a man walking to the gallows. My intercom buzzed. "Jane, there's a Tiffany Miller and a Carol Miller at the front desk. They don't have an appointment, but they're demanding to see the manager. They say it's urgent regarding the layout." My heart hammered against my ribs. They were here. "Send them to the blue meeting room," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Tell them the general manager will be with them shortly. Do not give them my name." "Okay, is everything all right?" Sarah asked, sensing the tension. "Everything is fine, just standard procedure." I stood up and walked to the window. I watched as a valet parked Aunt Carol's aging Lexus next to a Bentley. I could see them walking up the path. Aunt Carol was wearing a bright pink tracksuit, and Tiffany was in oversized sunglasses, holding a venti coffee cup, pointing at the rose bushes and shaking her head as if they weren't blooming correctly. They looked like they owned the place. Tiffany moved with that arrogant swagger, the physical embodiment of the phrase, "Do you know who I am?" I knew exactly who she was. She was a liability. I walked over to the mirror and straightened my blazer. I picked up a notepad and a pen. I wasn't going to reveal myself just yet. I needed to see how they treated my staff. I needed to see the entitlement in action, professionally. I walked down the back stairs and stood in the shadow of the hallway leading to the blue meeting room. The door was slightly ajar. "I don't understand why we have to wait," Tiffany's voice whined. "We're paying thousands of dollars. We should have priority." "I know, honey," Aunt Carol soothed. "These people are just disorganized. We'll set them straight. And make sure to tell them about the napkins. I want silk, not linen." "And the lighting," Tiffany added. "The sales girl said they couldn't do the fireworks, but I'm going to tell the manager that if they don't allow fireworks, I'm going to leave a 1-star review on every site in the country." "Good idea," Aunt Carol agreed. "Leverage, that's what you need." I listened, my blood running cold. Threatening the venue with bad reviews before the event even happened, demanding pyrotechnics in a historic wooden estate surrounded by dry gardens. They weren't just difficult clients, they were dangerous ones. I stepped back from the door, a plan forming in my mind. I wouldn't go in there, not yet. I walked back to the front desk. "Sarah," I said, quietly, "tell them the manager is stuck in a conference call but has noted their concerns. Ask them to email their requests. And Sarah, flag the account for a full financial audit." "A full audit?" Sarah's eyes went wide. "We only do that for high-risk clients," I finished. "Trust me on this one. Run the credit check on the cosigner, too. I want to see everything." By 2:00 p.m., the digital audit report was sitting in my inbox. My heart did a slow, heavy thump against my ribs as I clicked it open. I had suspected Tiffany was irresponsible. Her history of borrowing money and forgetting to pay it back was family lore. But I wasn't prepared for the sheer scale of what the credit report and our industry database revealed. It was a sea of red flags. In the hospitality industry, high-end venues like the Sterling Estate share a blacklist database with other luxury vendors, caterers, florists, travel agencies. It's a survival mechanism to protect against serial scammers. And there, under the name Tiffany Miller, were 7 separate flags in the last 3 years. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes widening. Flag 1, Custom Gown Boutique. Amount, $3,200. Chargeback reason, item not as described. Vendor note, client wore dress to event, posted photos, then disputed charge claiming the fabric was wrong. Flag 2, Caribbean Cruise Line. Amount, $4,500. Chargeback reason, services not rendered. Vendor note, client boarded ship, consumed services, disputed total amount post-trip citing emotional distress due to room view. Flag 3, Private Catering Co. Amount, $1,800. Chargeback reason, unauthorized transaction. It was systematic. It was friendly fraud, the act of using a service or buying a product, then disputing the charge with the credit card company to get the money back while keeping the goods. Tiffany wasn't just bad with money, she was a thief with a credit score. I looked at the current booking for the Sterling Estate. The card on file for the $15,000 payment due next week was Gary's, but the contract? I scanned the PDF. The contract was signed by both of them. That was the key. Because Tiffany was a signatory, her financial history made the entire contract toxic. I swiveled my chair and pulled the heavy binder of corporate risk management protocols from my shelf. I knew the rule existed, but I had never had to use it before. I flipped to Section 4, Paragraph 3. The Insolvency and Fraud Protection Clause. It stated clearly, if any signatory to the contract is found to have a history of documented merchant disputes, chargebacks, or financial fraud with other vendors exceeding $1,000, the Sterling Estate reserves the right to designate the booking as high risk. And the remedy, it was brutal. High-risk bookings require 100% of the estimated total cost to be paid via certified cashier's check. No credit cards. 60 days prior to the event, plus a refundable security bond of 50% of the total event cost. I did the math on a sticky note. Total wedding cost, $45,000. Security bond, $22,500. Total due immediately to secure the date, $67,500. Method, cashier's check only. Tiffany didn't have $67,000. I doubted Gary did either, not in liquid cash. I sat back, the binder resting on my lap. This wasn't revenge. This was my job. If I let this wedding proceed and Tiffany pulled a chargeback on a $45,000 bill after the wedding, I would be the one explaining to the owners why I lost the company that money. I would be the one fired. I picked up the phone. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "draft a notice of contract amendment due to risk assessment, and set up a meeting with the clients for tomorrow morning. Tell them it's mandatory regarding their reservation status." "The cousin again?" Sarah asked. "Yes, and Sarah, make sure security is near the lobby." The next morning, the air in the conference room was so tense it felt like it could snap. I had set the stage carefully. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, the file closed in front of me. I had instructed Sarah to bring them in, offer them water, and leave. I heard them before I saw them. "This is ridiculous," Aunt Carol's voice boomed from the hallway. "They probably want to upsell us on the wine package. Stay strong, Tiff. We aren't paying a dime more." "I know, Mom. It's annoying," Tiffany replied. The door swung open. Tiffany strode in, wearing oversized sunglasses and a white tracksuit that probably cost more than my first car. Aunt Carol followed, looking ready for a fight. They stopped dead when they saw me. For a solid 5 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Tiffany blinked, sliding her sunglasses down her nose. Aunt Carol's mouth dropped open. "Jane," Tiffany asked, a confused laugh bubbling up. "What? What are you doing here? Did you get a job as a waitress or something? We're waiting for the general manager." I didn't smile. I didn't stand up. I just rested my hands on the leather folder. "Hello, Tiffany. Aunt Carol," I said calmly. "Please take a seat." "I don't think so," Aunt Carol snapped, recovering from her shock. "We are here for a business meeting, Jane. We don't have time for your little. Whatever this is, go get your boss." "I am the boss," I said. The silence returned, heavier this time. "Excuse me," Tiffany scoffed. "I am the general manager of the Sterling estate," I repeated, keeping my voice low and professional. "I was promoted 3 weeks ago. Every contract, every vendor, and every booking goes through me." The color drained from Tiffany's face. It was fascinating to watch, the arrogance evaporating, replaced by a sudden, dawning horror. She looked at Aunt Carol, then back at me. You're the manager," Tiffany stammered. "I am, and that's why we're here." I opened the folder. "I've been reviewing your file." "Look, Jane," Aunt Carol started, her tone shifting from aggressive to sickly sweet in a nanosecond. "About dinner the other night. We were just stressed. You know how weddings are. Of course, you're invited. We can make space." "Right, Tiff?" "Yeah," Tiffany nodded frantically. "Totally. It was just a misunderstanding. We'd love for you to be there." I raised a hand to stop them. "This meeting isn't about the guest list. It's about the contract." I slid the single sheet of paper across the polished wood. "During a routine audit of upcoming high-value events, our risk assessment system flagged your profile," I lied smoothly. It wasn't a lie, really. I was the system. Specifically, it flagged a history of chargebacks and merchant disputes totaling over $10,000 in the last 3 years. Tiffany went rigid. "That's private information." "Not when you sign a liability waiver authorizing a credit background check," I countered. "Because of this history, our corporate insurance policy classifies this event as high risk. We cannot accept credit cards for any further payments. The risk of a post-event chargeback is too high." "So," Aunt Carol demanded, "so we'll write a check." "A certified cashier's check," I corrected, "for the full amount, plus a 50% security bond. The total due is $67,500. What? Tiffany shrieked, standing up. That's insane. The wedding isn't for 2 months. We have a payment plan. The payment plan is voided upon discovery of risk factors, I said, tapping the clause in the contract. Clause 14B, you signed it. I don't have $67,000 lying around. Tiffany yelled, her face turning red. This is discrimination. You're doing this because I didn't invite you. I am doing this, I said, my voice hardening, because you stole a dress from a boutique in 2021 and disputed a cruise in 2022. I am protecting my employer's assets. If you can provide the certified funds by 5:00 p.m. on Friday, the event proceeds. If not, the system automatically cancels the booking and releases the date to the waitlist. You can't do this, Aunt Carol hissed, leaning over the table. I will tell your father. I will tell everyone. You can tell whoever you like, I said, finally standing up to tower over them. But unless my father has 67 grand to lend you, it won't change company policy. You have 48 hours. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had 40 missed calls. My mother, my father, 3 aunts, and even my grandmother. I ignored them all, took a hot shower, and ordered takeout. I knew exactly what Tiffany was doing. She was spinning a narrative where I was the jealous, vindictive cousin destroying her happiness out of spite. The next morning, the harassment moved from family channels to professional ones. I arrived at work to find 3 negative reviews posted on our Google page overnight. One claimed the venue smelled like sewage. Another claimed the staff was rude. The third simply said, "Management engages in blackmail." They were all from anonymous accounts, but I knew who wrote them. Sarah, I said as I walked in, flag those reviews for removal as conflict of interest, and lock down the social media comments. Then my desk phone rang. It wasn't a family member, it was Gary. I stared at the caller ID, Gary Stevens. I took a breath and picked up. This is Jane Dawson. Jane, what the hell is going on? Gary's voice was shaking. He sounded exhausted and angry. Tiffany has been crying for 12 hours straight. She says you're demanding 70 grand in cash or you're canceling our wedding. Because she didn't invite you? I thought you were better than that. Is that what she told you? I asked quietly. She said you're making up fees. She said you're abusing your power. Gary, I said, keeping my voice professional. I am going to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest. Did Tiffany tell you why the payment terms changed? She said it was a risk fee you made up. It's not made up. Gary, are you near a computer? I'm at work, yes. Check your email. I just sent you the formal notice of amendment. I can't discuss Tiffany's personal credit history with you legally, but since you are a co-signatory on the contract, I can show you the risk report attached to the venue booking. Okay, hold on. I heard the clicking of a mouse. Silence stretched over the line for a long minute. What is this? Gary whispered. What is friendly fraud? It means disputing charges for services you already used, I explained gently. Gary, the venue requires the money up front because Tiffany has a documented history of reversing payments after the fact. We can't risk a $45,000 loss. The cruise, Gary muttered. We went on that cruise last year. She told me her dad paid for it as a gift. Her dad didn't pay for it, I said. She charged it, went on the trip, and then disputed the charge. And the catering, that was for her birthday party. I gave her cash for that. She charged it anyway. It appears so. I could hear the realization crashing down on him. He wasn't just marrying a spender, he was marrying a fraudster. And he was legally tying his finances to hers. Jane, he said, his voice cracking, I don't have $67,000. I've already put down 15. If we cancel, do we get the deposit back? I paused. This was the turning point. I could destroy them both right now. I could enforce the strict no refund on cancellation policy. Technically, no, I said. The deposit is non-refundable. I heard him choke back a sob. However, I continued, if the cancellation is mutual, if you withdraw the application before Friday, I might be able to authorize a partial refund of the initial $5,000. But Gary, you need to see the rest of the file. There's something else. What else? I can't tell you over the phone, but you need to come in. Alone. Before you sign that marriage license, you need to see what she tried to do to your credit. I'll be there in an hour, he said and hung up. I set the phone down. Tiffany thought she was fighting a war over a wedding date. She didn't realize she had just lost her soldier. I had instructed security to let Gary through the gate, but to hold anyone else. When he walked into my office 20 minutes later, he looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped, and he was clutching a folder of his own financial documents like a shield. "Sit down, Gary," I said softly, closing the door. He sank into the chair opposite me. "Show me, please, I just need to know the truth." I opened the file again. I turned the monitor so he could see the scanned documents. "This," I said, pointing to a document timestamped 3 days ago, "is an application for the Sterling Estate Platinum Credit Line. It's a financing option we offer for weddings over $50,000. Gary squinted at the screen. "I didn't apply for financing. We were going to pay cash for the balance." "I know," I said, "but the application was submitted electronically under your name. It used your social security number. It used your home address. But look at the email address associated with the account." Gary leaned in, his breath hitching. tiffmiller89@gmail.com. "And look at the digital signature," I added, zooming in. Gary stared at the squiggly line that was supposed to be his name. He pulled a checkbook out of his pocket and looked at his real signature. They weren't even close. "She tried to take out a $40,000 loan in my name," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "Behind my back." "Yes," I said. "And because our system flagged her for the previous fraud, the application was automatically rejected. That's why she was so desperate for the cash payment. She was trying to cover the tracks of a loan that didn't go through." Gary put his head in his hands. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of his ragged breathing. I watched him process the reality that the woman he loved viewed him not as a partner, but as a host organism to be financially drained. "I paid off her credit cards last month," he mumbled into his palms. "She said it was student loans. It was $12,000. I drained my 401k. I'm so sorry, Gary." He looked up and his eyes were hard. "She's a predator." Before I could answer, a commotion erupted in the hallway. I heard the heavy thud of the front doors swinging open, followed by the high-pitched, unmistakable screech of Aunt Carol. "I don't care who you are. Get out of my way. My daughter is getting married here." "Ma'am, you cannot enter this area." That was Frank, the head of security. "Gary," Tiffany's voice pierced the walls. "Gary, are you in there? Don't listen to her, she is lying." I looked at Gary. He stood up slowly. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked done. "Let them in," Gary said to me. I pressed the intercom button. "Frank, send them back." A moment later, the door flew open. Tiffany stormed in, her face blotchy from crying, mascara running down her cheeks. Aunt Carol was right behind her, wielding her purse like a weapon. "You witch!" Tiffany screamed at me, lunging toward the desk. "You are trying to ruin my life because you're jealous. You've always been jealous." "Stop it, Tiffany." Gary's voice was low, but it stopped her in her tracks. Tiffany froze, then immediately switched tactics. She threw herself at Gary, grabbing his arm. "Baby, thank God you're here. She's lying to you. She's making up fake documents. We need to sue her. We need to leave." Gary didn't move. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hug her back. He just looked down at her hands, gripping his jacket. "Did you apply for a loan in my name?" Gary asked. Tiffany blinked, her eyes darting to the computer screen and then back to Gary. "What? No, of course not. That's probably an identity theft thing. Jane probably did it to frame me." "Stop," Gary said. It wasn't a shout, but the authority in his voice was absolute. "I saw the email, Tiffany, it was yours." And Jane showed me the chargeback records, the cruise, the catering, the dress. "Those were misunderstandings?" Aunt Carol interjected, stepping forward. "Gary, you know how businesses are. They try to rip you off. Tiffany was just standing up for herself as a consumer." "She stole," Gary said, turning to look Aunt Carol in the eye. "And she stole from me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I just got off the phone with my bank while I was driving over here," Gary said. "I asked them about the withdrawals from our joint savings account, the wedding fund. Do you know what they told me?" Tiffany went pale. She let go of his arm and took a step back. "They told me that yesterday, $3,000 was transferred to a distinct account," Gary continued, his voice rising. "An account in the name of Carol Miller." He looked at Aunt Carol. "You guys are splitting my money. I'm working overtime, selling my stocks, emptying my retirement, and you two are funneling cash out the back door." "It was a loan," Tiffany shrieked. "Mom needed help with the mortgage. I was going to pay it back." "With what money, Tiffany?" I asked from my desk. "The money you don't have, or the money you were planning to steal from this venue?" Tiffany spun on me, her face twisted in a snarl. "Shut up, you're just the help. You're a glorified party planner. You don't know anything about love." "I know that love doesn't involve identity theft," I replied calmly. "I'm done," Gary said. The room went silent. "What?" Tiffany whispered. "I'm done," Gary repeated, louder this time. He took the engagement ring off his finger, a simple silicone band he wore for work, and placed it on my desk. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. "These are the keys to my apartment. I changed the locks an hour ago. Your stuff is in boxes on the curb. My mom is watching them." "Gary, no," Tiffany wailed, falling to her knees. It was a theatrical, desperate performance. "You can't do this. The invitations, the shame, what will people say?" "They'll say you got caught," Gary said. He looked at me. "Jane, cancel the booking." "Gary, wait." Aunt Carol grabbed his shoulder. "Think about the deposit. You'll lose $5,000 if you cancel now. Let's talk about this." Gary laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound. "Carol, I would pay $5,000 double just to get out of this room. Keep the money, Jane. Consider it a stupidity tax." "No," Tiffany screamed, scrambling to grab his leg. "You can't leave me. I have nothing." Gary stepped back, shaking her off. He looked at her with pure pity. "You have your mother. You deserve each other." He walked out of the office. He walked down the hall, past the stunned security guard, and out the front door without looking back. Tiffany stayed on the floor, sobbing into the carpet. Aunt Carol stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, realizing that her golden goose had just flown away. I stood up and smoothed my blazer. "Frank," I said into the intercom, "please escort Ms. Miller and Mrs. Miller off the property, and inform them that if they return, they will be arrested for trespassing." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind, but of a different kind. The cancellation of the wedding of the century sent shockwaves through our family. Aunt Carol tried to control the narrative, of course. She posted a long, rambling Facebook status about how the Sterling estate had discriminated against local families and how Gary had abandoned a vulnerable woman in her time of need. But nobody bought it. Gary had been smart. He didn't just leave. He went to the police. He filed a report for the attempted identity fraud regarding the loan application. It wasn't enough to send Tiffany to prison, but it was enough to create a public record. When family members started calling him, asking why he had been so cruel, he simply sent them a screenshot of the police report. The gossip mill ground to a halt, then reversed direction entirely. Tiffany's reputation disintegrated. It turned out Gary wasn't the only one she owed money to. Once the dam broke, other friends and distant cousins came forward with stories of borrowed money and unpaid debts. Tiffany was forced to move back into Aunt Carol's house, into the very basement she used to mock. As for the venue, I handled the situation by the book. I officially canceled the contract due to breach of terms. Because Gary had authorized the cancellation, I was able to release the date. And as fate would have it, a spot opened up for June 15th. A young couple, Sarah and Mike, had been on our waiting list for months. Mike was a firefighter, and Sarah was a public school teacher. They had saved for 3 years for a wedding, but could only afford our weekday package. When I called them and told them that a prime Saturday slot had opened up due to a cancellation, and that I could offer it to them at a discount to fill the date, Sarah cried on the phone. June 15th arrived with perfect weather. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I stood on the balcony overlooking the West Gardens, watching the ceremony. It was different from what Tiffany had planned. There were no pink fountains, no fireworks, no silk napkins. It was simple, elegant, and filled with genuine joy. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my dad. "Mom and I are proud of you, Janie. We're sorry we didn't see it sooner. Let's do dinner Sunday." I smiled, typing back a quick "see you then." I looked back down at the garden. The ceremony was ending. Mike kissed Sarah, and the guests erupted in cheers. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated happiness. I took a deep breath of the warm summer air. I thought about Tiffany, probably sitting in Aunt Carol's dark living room right now, refreshing her social media feed, bitter and angry. I thought about Gary, who I had heard was taking a long road trip out west to clear his head. And then I thought about myself. I had spent so long feeling like the boring cousin, the one who followed the rules, the one who didn't take risks. But standing there, watching the venue I managed run like a well-oiled machine, I realized that my boring stability was actually my superpower. It was the armor that protected me, and the sword that allowed me to cut through the lies. I turned away from the balcony and walked back into my office. There were contracts to review, vendors to call, and a business to run. "Jane," my assistant peeked her head in, "the father of the bride wants to thank you personally. He says you saved their dream." "I'll be right there," I said. I checked my reflection in the mirror one last time. I looked tired, but I looked strong. I wasn't just Jane the cousin anymore. I was Jane the general manager, and I had a wedding to run.